another episode of the Being and Doing podcast, where I'm trying to bring stories of interesting individuals and their interesting stories with the hope of sparking some curiosity about life and about yourself. And today, I'm really happy to be joined by Amalia Bali. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. And we are going to dive into some interesting topics of how we learn when we grow up, and also how we learn languages and how our psychology affects our ability to learn. So I'm really curious to hear Amalia's story and also the interesting things she's doing through her work. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you for inviting me and for accepting me on your podcast. I'm sure that we're going to have some interesting ideas that will come out of it.
Hmm. So I'm curious. The first question I always ask is, what are some words that you describe yourself with or that you associate yourself with?
Um, I think the first one that comes to mind is authenticity.
Mm.
I feel like it's one word that really defines me now. And especially, I'd say, for the last 2 years or so, ever since I started my own psychotherapy journey and self discovery. And I often tell my therapist that she's done something to me and broken me in a way, because I feel like whenever I attempt to maybe mask or just hide certain feelings or ideas in an attempt to not maybe hurt others or not create any sort of conflicts, it almost feels like it's eating me from the inside. So
Mm.
I have to find a way of kind of staying true to myself and being authentic to what I believe in and what I feel. So I think that's something that really I associate with myself, at least.
Mm.
And if I was to think of another one, I think it would be um, family.
Mm.
It's again a concept or a word that means a lot to me, and I feel like I'm always trying to. I wouldn't necessarily say balance, because I think it's very hard to actually keep a balance between work and family, but maybe alternate them well enough so that I give enough time to family and my personal life. Um, and a third word that I would associate or I would identify myself with is um, dedication for what I do,
Mm.
and doing something that I believe in and something that um, means something beyond just a job or an income or an activity of the day to day.
Mm. So what is it that then you believe in, and what drives the work you do?
At the core of it is the idea or the mindset that anyone and everyone can learn and can grow. It doesn't matter if you were this person that was nerdy in school, and yes, it was easy for you to you know learn things, assimilate information. And it doesn't matter if you were considered a bad student and you always came home with bad grades or whatsoever, because with the right methods, the time, and the necessary support, anyone can learn. And I'm speaking here, let's say, especially about language, because it's one of the things, or is one of the myths that kind of comes up with adults, that from a certain age you don't learn a language anymore. If you haven't learned it when you were a child, there is no chance. That's what they say. It's not true. So yeah, I think this is at the core of it. Anyone can learn. Everyone can do it with the right mindset.
Yeah, I must say, I really resonate with that because, and I also, one of my passions is talking about how much human potential we are wasting by
Mhm,
imposing these internal limits, based on what someone has told us we can or cannot do at a certain age, being a certain gender or whatever you name it.
mhm,
And I'm wondering, I know you, I mean, I don't know because we don't know each other much, but somehow I assume that you're saying this, not just for saying it, but that you have actually witnessed and experienced that anyone can learn. So maybe if you want to share some stories or anything that kind of supports you in doing this work, and why do you believe that anyone can do
mhm.
it?
Um, so let's say that the basis of it kind of started with my studies in linguistics and psycholinguistics, especially during the masters. That's where let's say, academic or the research kind of basis is. There is absolutely no evidence to say that with age people can't learn a language anymore. Certain factors, yes, might change. Maybe the speed that you learn at, maybe the methods that you need to use will have to change with age. But that's not necessarily because of genetics or age as such, but
Mm,
because of all the factors that change with age, your priorities in life, the mental capacity that you're giving to learning something, as opposed to focusing on your day-to-day survival, like job, house, family, and so on. So these are the things that actually kind of influence it. And then at a practical level, what I've been doing for the last 3 years in teaching adults kind of prove that. And it's, I think, a nice proof of that is that a lot of the students that we have within the academy are actually above 30, 35 years old. And that's usually the age where they say that, because usually people already kind of have kids by that age. They almost consolidate this idea in their mind, looking at their kids, how quick they're picking up on things or how fast they're learning something. They kind of start to believe even more that I can't do it because I'm looking at my child and look how quick she's doing it. Um, and then there's a lot of examples that I can give. But if I go back to what I was saying earlier about this idea that if you were not good in school, and you are not the brightest student, there's a high chance that you're not going to learn as an adult either. There's a specific example I have in mind. I was teaching guy from Romania, and he was, let's say, according to society or school norms, lower than a mediocre kind of student.
mm,
And I think we studied initially for 3 months continuously, and I was seeing progress, but not as fast or as quick compared to some of his group mates, for example. And then I've kind of started to look into things and do a bit more research and see, do I need to change something myself in the way I'm teaching? Is there something that doesn't work, like specifically for him? And whilst I was doing this, somewhere towards the end of the 3 months, it was very fascinating because it was almost like he needed a click at some point, because he came back to one of the sessions at the end of these 3 months, and it's almost like something has unlocked in his mind, and everything that we had learned for those 3 months he started using. And in my mind I was, oh my god, like it's true, you know what all the studies are actually saying. Learning will happen, and anything that you do will actually show in practice, but you need to give it time. Because just because I do it quicker or his classmate does it quicker, it doesn't mean that he needs to do it the same way. And it also doesn't mean that all that information or knowledge or studying that he's doing doesn't actually get stored somewhere. It does, but there is a little bit of a journey from the, let's say, theoretical knowledge and getting that information stored, and then your mind understanding how to use it in practice. And you can't force that, or you can't put a deadline on it. You
Mm.
have to give your mind enough time to understand in its own rhythm how to use it and how to employ all of that. And I think for me, because this was literally like, I think in the first couple of months, it was one of the first students that I had 3 years ago. And I still remember it to date, because I thought at the time as well, how important is it for the teacher or for the coach or for the guide that you have to not give up on you
Yeah.
just because they don't see the results that they see in other students. Because if I had given up at that point, he definitely would have given up.
On himself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I am trying at least to pass on forward a little bit more, um, with the team that I have as well, and kind of showing people that who you're getting taught by, and the mindset that your tutors have can make a lot of difference in how
Mm.
you see yourself and how you perceive, progress, success, or failure as well. I think they're very, very important aspects.
Mm. Thank you a lot for sharing this. And I think you've mentioned one important word as you were speaking, which is support. And I think with the right support, many people can do wonders,
Yeah.
even things that they themselves are not aware of that they have the capacity to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's thank you a lot for sharing this example. And I'm wondering, you've mentioned as you started speaking about authenticity, um, and I'm wondering what was keeping you inauthentic? What were some things inside you that were kind of stopping you from sharing your truth and your values?
Well, I am a people pleaser by default.
Mm.
And I think default here means simply, or it was defined by the society that I lived in, because I don't think we are born as people pleasers. We are taught to be so by circumstances. And I think for me that was a big kind of blockage. Um, I I always had this need of validation from the others. And it always felt like if I am actually expressing everything that I feel or I think, there is something to lose. Um,
Mm.
there is a punishment for actually saying what what you think or what you feel. And maybe that comes from the parenting that my generation experienced in Romania as well, because I very much grew up with my mom, who had this idea that if she's saying something to me, I don't actually have neither the motives or the right to question it.
Mm.
So if, as a random example, if she said that the sky is green and I saw it's blue, it's fine, it's green. We agree with it because I was a child, and I think these are things that are kind of passed on generation by generation. So I'm not blaming her for it as an adult, but I'm trying to change it for myself and how I take it forward. But yeah, I think people pleasing was a big impediment for my authenticity.
Mm. And I'm wondering also, I can relate to that also being from the Balkans. I think It's a lot about um, kind of listening to authority,
Mm-hmm.
and we have grown up in quite authoritative regimes.
Yeah.
um, and sometimes it was actually life threatening to have your own opinions and to
Yeah.
think that the sky is blue.
Yeah.
uh,
Exactly.
so I can see how we need to learn freedom somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm wondering in that is, how did you allow yourself the freedom to start your own business and to take this huge leap?
Um, it's interesting because it is a little bit still linked to the idea of people pleasing. Um, I consider myself very lucky or very blessed because I believe in God. So I met my husband during the university here. So it's almost 10 years as well since I know him. And he's always been this person that kind of pushed me to believe more in myself and
Mm,
think that I can do more. And when the pandemic kind of hit, that's when we got married as well. And we had our wedding in September 2020. And we moved from the city where we were living initially. And it automatically meant that I have to find another job, another university or so. And we are living now in a location that is not necessarily very convenient in that sense. So with that in mind, and because I was speaking a lot about the struggles of people in the UK who don't speak English as a first language, in terms of adapting culturally, not necessarily at the basics of it, because yes, you can get by with just a few words, it's fine. Um, he kind of came up with the idea that why don't you do something about it yourself then? And this was still before I started therapy and I've kind of started working on myself. So I think a part of me did it only to make him happy that I'm
mm.
trying at least. um, so maybe that people pleasing kind of thing, if it didn't turn out that bad.
Well, that's an
Um,
interesting thing. I think when I think of people pleasing, it depends on the person that you're pleasing, because the person can be actually really nice and use
yeah,
it for your own benefit.
yeah,
So I think people pleasing is only dangerous where the person you're trying to please is doing that for for their own for their
yeah.
own goals, not for yours.
Yes, and I think, for example, in this scenario, it wasn't that it was a bad idea or it was something that I didn't like doing.
Mm,
It was simply, I think, the fear that didn't let me do it. And that's where maybe the people pleasing was a bit stronger than the fear. And
yeah.
I said, okay, rather than me, or rather than, let's say, my husband thinking that I'm not doing enough or I'm not trying enough or, you
Mm,
know, any of those sorts, let me just try and do it. And
mm,
it might actually work. And it was really nice because everything turned out really good. And because I'm actually doing something that I believe in, things
mhm,
did get easier. And I really started enjoying it. But again, it took a few good months, almost a year, for me to get this courage that I can take it to the next level and I can um, take it further than just teaching and getting by and creating this whole concept of, what the academy is now and what is the mentality, sorry, behind it, and what we are trying to achieve with people or with adults.
mm. And I wonder, how was it for you to get your first clients? How was it for you to say, I'm doing this. I know what I'm offering, because I'm at this stage of kind of making these transitions, and
hmm
I'm very selfishly asking these questions now.
um No, it's a good question. And honestly, when I look back, I think that I was a little bit naive
Mm-hmm.
and I had a little bit of a mm, kind of bold courage in a way because I did start everything very systematically in the sense that this conversation with my husband was happening around October, end of October, beginning of November. And then I said that because I had a little bit of background in business as well, my undergraduate degree was in English language and business studies. It was a
Mm-hmm.
joint degree. I said, okay, I'm going to do a proper thing. So I began working on materials around November, December. Then I started advertising and making posts on Facebook that, look, this is the course that I'm doing. I've come up with a structure for it so that I can show people, okay, this is what you're going to study. I had all the experience and the practical knowledge of teaching, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
what comes under language. What I didn't have is the experience of business and advertising and how do you get like the clients or so. Um, and the first thing that I did was, for example, join Facebook groups that had either Romanians in the UK or other nationalities, and I started posting on those. So that was the beginning, and that's how I got the first students in January 2021, basically. Um, and I just remember now, you when you sent me a few like guiding questions. One of the questions was, when did you first feel successful or something like
Uh-huh.
that?
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the moments when I felt successful because it felt like I'm doing something that I believe in. I
Mm-hmm.
can choose what method to use like for these people because I know their background. I know the struggles that they've had with because I was an immigrant myself. I am still an immigrant, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can do it all on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So that felt like a little bit of success to me. And then from there, things just went upwards and onwards, basically.
Mm-hmm. And what were your struggles as an immigrant? When did you, how old were you when you moved here? What prompted you to move here and all these kind of things?
I moved here when I turned 19. So that was right after finishing my studies in Romania, the A level equivalent, basically. What prompted me to move was when I was 15, I had the opportunity of coming to the UK for a school exchange. And I came for 2 weeks, and I was studying at a school in Watford. And it's the first time it kind of fascinated me, this whole concept and the culture, the British culture of not being judgmental towards the other person, at least not in the superficial things. And a very random, silly example that I can give is we were about 14, 15 years old at the time. And I was looking at all of the girls in the British school here. They didn't seem to mind or care or even think about the fact that their tights were broken
Mm.
from their uniform, you know?
Yeah, it's very relatable.
And as someone who comes from Romania or an Eastern European country where
Yeah,
you're not supposed to get out of the house unless you look tiptoed.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, to me, it just felt so refreshing that it doesn't matter. Like things can go wrong, and that doesn't mean that you need to crawl somewhere of shame. Um, you can just go on living because no one is going to pay attention to it other than ourselves who came from abroad. um, but I loved that, and I kind of got this dream at that time that I want to not just study here, but I want to live here and live like these guys basically.
Mhm.
So when I finished my high school, my college in Romania, um, that was that's what I had in mind. So I started applying to study here, but I did apply too late. So I had to come and just work for a year.
Mhm.
I was just working, and then I've kind of started university the following year, basically. Um, but yeah, that was at least the beginning of it. And it's interesting because ever since I said that I'm coming or I got here, it never felt temporary to me.
Mm.
I've I've never thought that I'm just coming to study and then I'm going back. Um, and I think that helped a lot in terms of adapting and kind of finding my place here. Um, as an immigrant, I'd say um, I had never tried to um, pretend or hide that I am Romanian. Yes, I am. In my head, honestly, I'd never even thought of things like discrimination. When I have conversations now with other people and they talk about it, I honestly try to think back and identify whether I lived something like that or I was so completely
Oblivious.
oblivious that I didn't even notice that it was happening. I don't know, but yeah, that's at least what my attitude was like. So, like I said, maybe because I was young, there was a drop of naivety in there that helped.
Mm, mm. So, what were some of the struggles that you may have experienced being an immigrant or just being in a country that, yeah, you don't know? Not necessarily because you're discriminated, but just
Yeah.
because you live in a completely new place outside of the people that you know and they love you and all these kind of things.
Mm. I think the biggest struggle that I had was in terms of my studies and education, especially in the first year, because I had come from an educational system in Romania where I was amongst the first ones, or I think Americans say it more. I was a topper in studies, and then coming here, I got into a very good university. I didn't even know at the time that is that good of a university, Loughborough University. Um, and the educational system in the UK, or at least the universities, the expectations that they have from you are very different to how we studied. I had come from Romania where I was the like an expert memorizing machine, basically. Give me anything to learn, to memorize. I can say it back to you and I can do it perfectly. But we were not taught the concept of critical thinking.
Mm,
And I remembered in the first year, at least at university, in every assignment that I was doing, there was at least one piece of feedback that said, you are not demonstrating critical thinking.
mm,
And the fascinating thing to me was that neither of my tutors at the university was able to explain to me what that means, actually. Because I think it comes very naturally to people that study here and are educated here, and they're actually struggling to explain it to someone that hasn't done it. Um, they can see that it's not there, but they don't know how to teach you basically
yeah.
to do it. um, and I feel like maybe that was definitely one struggle that I had. And other than that, um, I think at the beginning, like any other person, just understanding cultural communication gaps. This whole concept of British politeness. Um, what does it mean? Why do you say things in a certain way? And why, if if you are too direct, you can actually be rude. Although maybe the idea behind it is the same. Because speaking English is one thing, and speaking English culturally, it's a
It's a
different thing.
completely different thing. Yeah.
So for me, I think these two were definitely a struggle to begin with.
Mm. And I find it really interesting that um, one of those things where you can notice when something is missing, but because you haven't had the struggle of actually obtaining it,
Yeah.
it's much more difficult to transmit it as a knowledge because
Hmm.
it came in Serbia we say it came with the mother's milk.
Yes.
Yeah, the kind of thing. Yeah, that's, I mean, I can see how that is part of our programs. And actually, I was very privileged to be from the Balkans and going to science school. And I think that's where I got that part. But I can totally see how just going through regular schooling doesn't really equip you
Yeah, no.
to actually be allowing yourself and taking into account what we spoke in the beginning of authoritative systems where you're
Yeah.
not supposed to have an opinion, suddenly
Yes.
now someone asks you to have an opinion. It's very challenging.
Yes. And it's nice that you brought this up, because I was just thinking now that the whole idea of critical thinking and why the difference is so big for someone who comes from a different system is, in critical thinking, you are supposed to question what the other person is saying. You're supposed to say that maybe there's another explanation, maybe there's another way of thinking. Let's look into it at least. Whilst in Romania, the idea was, if your teacher said that is, I don't know, straight, who are you to question whether is it oval,
Yeah.
does it go in a different way? No, it's how your teacher says it.
Yeah.
um and I think even that, like, if I think now about the a whole idea of seminars and tutorials that you have in the UK, I think in my first year I never said a word in any of them, although they were supposed to be interactive, because in my mind I was like, well, if the book says it like that, how, what can I say about it? It is like that. you know um so it's hard to get over that when you've practiced it for so long.
Yes. Yeah.
It's, how do you allow yourself to say, no, I don't agree?
Yeah, no, exactly that. And actually it's very saddening to know how many people have conditioned and not only that they have conditioned but have never been exposed to something different and then they stay in that I'm
Mm,
waiting for an authority to tell me what to think or how to think or
yeah.
what to believe uh, without actually finding their own words and their own truths
Mm-hmm.
off on the matter. And I'm wondering, um, as you're describing all of this, I'm also sitting with a part of you has probably also kind of searched for this or kind of felt the freedom of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering now that you've gone through this, how like how does that help you as a teacher? Because I can imagine how much people can learn from you because you had that journey.
Mm. um I think just generally anything that we experience can help us in whatever activity we do. And I think if I can show people that it's okay and it feels good and it's nice to get to a point where you don't have to think about what the other person's opinion is of you, of your ideas, of your life. That is a very big thing for me. And I think in general, as a teacher, I've always wanted to be the teacher that leaves something behind that is more than just a subject. Um, and maybe this is where my experience and how I've kind of experienced the UK can help the students that I have. And I think I can include here everything, whether it's my experience in studying over here, in working with British people or in like British environments, um, the therapy, the way that I've kind of grown up and I've understood or I've discovered things about myself. I think all of this definitely does make a difference in my, at least in my attitude as a teacher and how the other people perceive me. Um,
Mm.
because they say, a lot of the students say that, or people that follow me on social media say that there's something different about you. And I always say that usually when you see something different in the other person, it's because they've had some sort of struggles or traumas that they've learned to process or deal with. Um, and it's that kind of sensitivity maybe that you're noticing in someone.
Mm. And I'm curious in your journey as much as you want to share, what were some of the discoveries in your therapeutic journey that were kind of most moving or surprising or um even disturbing?
um, there's a lot of them, but I'm thinking of two specifically. One is discovering or understanding that I am a perfectionist.
Mm,
And the surprising thing for me was that I've never considered myself to be one because I always looked at my mom being a perfectionist because she was in all the small things or all the tangible things, how the house looks, how the cleaning is done, how whatever, everything had to be perfect. And she was expecting it as much from herself as from the others. With me, I've never had one of these things. It doesn't matter to me what my environment looks like. But when it comes to emotions or reactions or my performance generally, I can be quite a perfectionist.
mm,
And it's interesting because, again, I don't expect it from other people. It's one of those cases of do what the preacher says, not what he does.
mm-hmm.
Because I teach my students the complete opposite. You know, allow yourself to make mistakes, get used to them, or so. So when I first kind of discovered this in therapy, I was like, oh my god, how am I a perfectionist? It's yeah, it was very very interesting and shocking as well. But it was amazing because I think once you discover and you accept something, you can actually make steps to change it.
Yeah.
um, it's if you're unaware of it, you can't change it. You're not going to know even how to recognize it, so you can change something. So I think now I've learned to at least recognize the moments when I'm going on a bit of a perfectionist tangent. Um, and the second thing that um, I think was a bit shocking in terms of discoveries in therapy was just understanding or accepting that it's absolutely normal for anyone, including myself, to make mistakes or to hurt others consciously. Because I think as humans, we all, in theory, accept that we can harm others or we can cause them pain unconsciously. And
Mm,
we kind of roll with this idea because it's comfortable and it feels good to think that, well, okay, I've hurt you, but I didn't mean to, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and it was revolutionary for me to accept that sometimes out of, I don't think it's even selfishness, it's actually some sort of need of protecting yourself that you choose consciously to cause someone else pain or to hurt someone, not necessarily in, you know, critical ways or bad ways, but simply as a human, like hurt
Can
someone's
you give
feelings.
can you give an example? Because I'm very curious about this particular one. It resonates with me, and also I'm terrified of it. So I kind of
Yes,
wanna.
it's that's exactly how it kind of feels basically. um I'm trying to think of an example that feels comfortable to share.
Mhm,
um and mm, let's say, if I give an example from work, like
mhm,
work related. um for example, I if I'm going, like, I went through a time of burnout, let's say, and it was a time when I was feeling very down myself. I was trying to find some time to recover, and at the same time I was being asked for help from one of my colleagues, and it's whenever I'm being asked for help, it's usually one of the most critical times for me, because again, it's tapping a little bit into that people pleasing. Do I
mhm,
choose myself or do I choose you, just to make you happy? And for me, consciously saying to someone, no, I can't help you, because I know that at that moment in time, if I help you, I'm going to harm myself.
mhm,
um, I think it's one of the examples that um, I can basically think about. Um, and I know I'm a little bit vague with the
mhm,
answer, but that's just because the specific situation that I have in mind, where I've come across this, it's a little bit too personal, and I'm not
mhm.
comfortable
Sharing it.
sharing that. But yeah, I think it's
But I think what I'm hearing you say in this is basically consciously choosing yourself. That doesn't necessarily mean actively doing harm.
yeah,
It's the idea that sometimes by choosing yourself,
yeah,
that might leave the other person not necessarily hurt, but this in discomfort.
yeah,
And I think as I'm listening to you speaking now, it's also tolerating the fact that people are able to stay with that discomfort and we don't need to save them from feeling not comfortable.
yes, definitely. And it's simply accepting that there are moments in life when you are going to be selfish in a way or another.
Mm,
And like you said, it's consciously knowing that you're choosing yourself, but at the same time being conscious of the fact that by doing that, the other person might feel hurt or might get upset or might experience some sort of discomfort, as you're saying it. And I think that's not a very easy pill to swallow,
mhm,
because we as humans like to believe that we are good people and we don't make decisions that hurt other people, or
mhm.
at least not consciously.
Yeah.
But sometimes we do. And I think it's okay to accept that, because only by accepting that you can actually maybe make better choices earlier on so you don't have to get to that point.
Mhm.
Or at least it will help you be transparent enough about it and communicate it to other people why you're making a certain choice.
Yeah.
Um, and choosing yourself is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's one idea that we, or some of us, got wrong somewhere.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I can very much relate to that. Um And then speaking about success, what is then success for you today?
Um, Success for me today, um, I think is being able to stay true to who I am at and the values that I believe in. Being able to like progress and grow and move further without depending or without hindering anyone else's success. Simply, doing your own thing, doing the best of it, without looking right and left, who's doing it better or who's doing it worse, um, and just growing, whether that is professionally, financially, personally. I think that that is success. Maybe understanding when, um, or how to adapt to change, and new situations. I think that's also part of my definition of success.
Hmm. And slightly related to that, how do you see power and privilege in that context or in any context?
Um, Power and privilege. That's an interesting question. I've never thought of it actually.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, if you haven't and you don't have a like immediate answer, feel free to say pass.
um, no, it's interesting actually the question. I think privilege, we all have it in a way or another or in different aspects of our life, but I think the privilege only helps as a starting point.
Hmm.
After that starting point, the privilege, I don't think it matters as much as your actual work and the consistency and the effort that you put in. Um, and I'm thinking of that from the perspective of, have I seen more other people that are more privileged than me? Growing up, yes, a lot of them. I didn't, I don't, or at least again, because I was saying that it relates to different parts. I don't consider myself having grown up privileged, at least financially. So if I speak from that perspective, I think that only just matters in the starting point.
Hmm.
Afterwards, it's your work, your effort, your beliefs that will make a difference.
Hmm. Hmm. Again, I can very much relate to this. Um, and I'm wondering, is there anything around the topic of your work that we haven't covered and you kind of want to add?
um, I think maybe just the idea of um, what are the or what is the role of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
or emotional experiences when it comes to learning,
Yeah.
and getting over blockages in a second language or in English, in this example. Because I feel like with a lot of the adults that I work, and you've probably heard it as well, there is this concept or an actual phrase: I can understand everything, and in my head, I speak perfectly fine. But when I open my mouth, either the words don't come out or I don't make sense.
Yeah, that's what my mom says.
Yeah. And a lot of that actually has to do with past emotional experiences that we've had, either with like learning English specifically, or just the idea of learning and education in general. Um, and a lot of these blockages come from our fear of saying something wrong,
Hmm.
of looking stupid, when we say something, of almost losing our respect just because we're making mistakes. And again, that's, I think, something that comes a lot from the cultural background and the way we grew up. And the quicker students or people understand this part, the easier it is to start unlocking them slowly, slowly, and understanding that, okay, I can say something and I can say something wrong and nothing is going to happen.
Mm.
Like 99% of the times, nothing is going to happen. And I think, especially in the UK, and it's probably your experience as well, it's very, very rarely that a British person will tell you, you didn't say that right.
Yeah. French will though.
Maybe, yes.
Yeah, I must say my experience with French speaking, it is very frustrating. Not with some people, but uh, sometimes it will be like, ah, ah, and then like they don't even try to understand you, but they immediately is a judgment. But yes,
Yes.
obviously not. It's not about generalizations.
Yes. There's always exceptions, even
Yeah,
in the UK. But in general,
in general,
British
yeah,
people will not look at you like, "Oh, what did you
yeah,
say?"
yeah.
They might ask you, and even this idea, or even this situation where you get asked, "Sorry," or
Mhm.
"What did you say? Can you repeat that again?" Most of the times, it's not even because of your language. It's just because, I don't know, maybe you said it too low. Maybe there was a distraction somewhere, but automatically, because we feel underconfident about our language skills, we associate the sorry and the can you repeat again
Yeah,
with, oh, I don't speak English well enough. That's why.
yeah.
And it happened to me just a few weeks ago. I was on a call with the like a medical clinic, and they were simply asking me my date of birth. But the way that she said it, I swear I didn't understand it. And I think I told her about 4 times, can you repeat that again? And by the fourth time, I already started to feel a little bit stupid. And I still didn't understand it. And then I was like, I'm sorry, can you say it in other words? Because I don't get it. And then she said, I don't know how she said it. And I was like, oh my God, that's what it was. But why should I take that upon myself? That
Mm,
it's my, you know, it's because I don't speak English well, or it's because, I don't know, my pronunciation is whatever, or I'm not understanding this accent or the other. Why should I take it on myself? Because when we speak to people in our own mother tongue, it can happen.
yeah.
Why do we take it so dramatically when it happens in English or in the second language?
Mm, mm. And I wonder, how do you um, work with people when you start realizing that the block is not the language, but the emotional history?
um so one of the things that we do is we try and remind them or make them share moments or experiences from their past where a similar situation has happened. And it's usually school related or community, society related. And like I said, in general, with discoveries about yourself, the quicker you realize where it's coming from, the easier it's actually to battle it and say, well, if it's just because of that, then that means it doesn't have anything to do with right now. I can try it. And then it's constantly kind of exposing them and reminding them that this is why you're having it.
Mm,
Let's try and get over that, and let's keep practicing. It's not going to happen overnight, but every time you try it a little bit more and a little bit more, you will see the results in the end.
mm, mm. So in a way, the way you're working with people is a combination of teaching language and understanding and coaching and understanding their beliefs
Yeah,
around language.
yes. And I think that is very, very important when you work with adults. Um, and especially if you work with adults that are trying to um, overcome the cultural barrier as well. Because I feel like, for example, it might be easier or the impact might not be as much if I'm teaching people that are already or that are still in their home country because they are still in their comfort zone. They don't feel as pressurized to
Yeah.
do something or to prove something. When they are already in the UK as immigrants, there is this need to prove yourself. And because there is that, it automatically impacts on your communication as well and you know how you kind of feel. But I always say that one one step at a time um, usually helps.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, if you go to the GP and you're trying to have a conversation, they're asking you something, you don't know what to say back, or you start to say a full sentence, only two words come out, you realize that you've pronounced something wrong, and then your mind says, hello, don't continue because you're just going to embarrass yourself. And then there's a blockage, and then you lose your words. The best way to deal with that is literally tell yourself or tell the other person, give me a minute, and then start again. And
Mm.
even if instead of two words, you can say three words the second time, it's already progress.
Yeah.
And with each of these small kind of wins, you are going to get there. But the more you run away from it, the more it's going to chase you, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting as I was just having I was having a flashback of how children learn languages and they imitate
Hmm.
and and it takes them 2 years to imitate until they actually are able to fully give like proper sentences. But when you become an adult, you think after 3 months you need to like be a fully fledged person that just
Yes.
kind of so it's a very interesting it's a lot about expectations
Yeah.
and how much we put on ourselves when we grow up,
Mhm.
but probably sometimes the speed of learning maybe even be quite similar.
Yes. And
uh,
it's a very nice example and comparison that you gave because that's exactly how I explain it sometimes to the students as well. If even as children, some of them will learn how to say the words correctly and the R's and the S's or whatever when they're two. Some of them will learn it at 4 years old, and that's perfectly fine. If as children we don't learn the same, why should we do it as adults?
yeah,
And like you said, if as children it takes us a few years to actually get to speak correctly, why do we expect it to happen much quicker as an adult? And the reality is, it can happen much quicker because you have a lot of different associations in your mind that you can use to help you. But at the same time, you need to give yourself just a little bit of leeway to
yeah,
be able to do that.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And I also wanted to ask because you said something around uh, therapy being helpful from the time where you needed to scale or to,
Hmm.
um, and I wonder if you could say more about that, or what was your impediment to growing your business or making the next step in your business, and how did therapy support you there?
Um, what I was saying earlier about, for example, understanding that I'm a perfectionist, even that helped a lot. Because, for example, like a down kind of moment, and when I realized that I'm a perfectionist, I had received a lot of good feedback and reviews. Um, and I think there was one student that wasn't quite happy with the lessons, with the approach, whatever it was at the time. And I remembered I discussed it in the therapy session because it had put me down quite a lot. And I remember, like Julia, my therapist at the time, asking me, so for example, out of 10 people, how many of them do give you like a bad review or they're not happy? And I said that maybe one, like sometimes not even 1 in 10. So she was like, so the nine that are happy are automatically being canceled out by this one that is not happy. Isn't that your perfectionism coming through? And is it realistic to expect everyone to like it and be 100% happy?
Mm.
And it's not. And if I if I would have allowed myself to um, be put down by like such reviews or comments or situations, it actually does stop you from progressing because um, you spend so much time and energy in trying to fix that one person
Yeah.
that you forget how much you could do with the rest of the nine or
Yeah.
so. So I think that was one aspect, at least, where therapy helped me. And another thing that helped in terms of therapy as well is that after I've formed my team since last year, basically, we started to do group therapy as well. And that helped a lot in terms of business and business growth and just
In group
the
therapy with your team?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's a first. I dream of a world where we do that, and it's lovely to know that that's already there.
Yes. And it's honestly helped a lot because it helped us understand each other and understand each other's maybe trigger points in work situations, in our relationship with students, because we work with people. Um, you know, when and especially when you take on this kind of coaching approach, the downside or the risk of that is literally um, kind of getting immersed into their own drama and life. And if you don't know how to get through that, or how to set the boundaries for yourself, because yes, we are teachers, we are coaches, but we are not therapists. It's a whole different life or a whole different aspect if you go into the independent traumas that they have, and sometimes they bring them to class, and you need to know how to deal with them to help both of you, you as a teacher and then the other person as a student as well. um, so again, that I think helped a lot, like doing the group therapy sessions.
Mm. So this is actually really lovely because I think it illustrates the commitment and the respect you have for your so for the people you're working with and also for the students you're working with. And
Mm,
so I am quite curious about how did this idea come for you and what supported and how did you um, bring it to your team because it's a very sensitive thing to
yeah.
bring and to say, "Oh, we're going to do group therapy now." So how did you find the way as someone who is leading people to bring this in?
I just realized that I brought the idea in just before Christmas last year, so it's
Mhm.
it's about a year. And yes, I did have a little bit of a worry and anxiety bringing it up because it's, I think, to a certain extent, it's still a little bit of a taboo kind of topic. um, therapy, and especially group therapy, and at work, with your colleague and your boss, essentially. But I had spoken a lot about my own kind of journey and my own like self discoveries, and my team knew how much it means to me, like therapy, and what are the positive aspects that come from it. Because usually, whenever I was struggling with something, especially if it was work related, I would share it with them. That look, the reason I reacted last week that way is because this and this was going on. So when I presented it to them, I've kind of said it in a way that I think this would help us as a team be more cohesive, as understand each other better, and automatically feel more comfortable working with each other and with the students. And I've kept it completely optional to begin with. I said that it's there. I'm going to do it, but don't feel forced like to attend. See how you feel. I would be happy to, obviously, but it's completely up to you because it's not something that you can, I think, enforce on people, and you shouldn't enforce it on people. Um, but they loved it. They still
Mm.
do.
So you are
So
now doing this as part of your business.
yeah.
Oh man, I must say, it is a really a workplace I'm dreaming of, and I personally I personally feel that it is somehow um what the future of work should look like.
Mm,
Especially, it's really funny for me how, like most of the managers are basically their major thing is to work with people, but they're still valued based on their technical expertise.
yes.
And that's fine. I don't think like
Mm,
everyone should be a therapist level quality to work with people, but at least have the awareness that, well, now your responsibility shifts, and therefore you need to have a different kind of awareness created. And I think it's quite futuristic in a way what you have done for your company
um,
or for your academy.
thank you so much. I think I was maybe lucky enough as well to have worked in nice places before, or at least with nice leaders that I felt supported me. And it was always my idea when, even when the whole thing of, okay, making it a business like the academy began, um, to be a leader that is actually more about the team, because the team is what will actually make it work. If the team is not built and is not happy working there, and they're not happy with each other, they're not going to be able to pass that on to the students, and that automatically impacts on everything else that is business related. So it's I think it comes with its challenges as well, because I feel like sometimes it is a little bit difficult to separate my personal self from the team or from the business. And usually, if there are instances where I have to make decisions that are more manager like, I actually start the email or the meeting with, I have my manager hat on. you know,
Mm.
I have to have this conversation with you guys because this and this is going on. This doesn't change who I am as a person and who I am as a leader to you, but unfortunately there's no one else to do it in my place. So
Mm.
I have to have that as well. um but I think the the benefits that come out of it are way more than these small moments when there's a bit of a conflict of emotions
Mm.
involved.
Well, that's actually a very interesting one that you're bringing up, because I was on a leadership course, and one of the exercises was to identify what are the hats we are wearing within that role,
Mm,
because often some people have a fixed idea of which hat they need to wear. Some people have no idea what other hats they need to wear. Some people have no idea what preferences they have for for which hats they want and which hats they might not want to wear. And none of this is like there is like a wrong or a right
Yeah.
thing to do, but it's more like without awareness, uh, we are operating in a way that there is no communication. And if someone doesn't want to wear I don't want to wear a trainer hat, but then that means that I need to have a person that's
That's
going to
it.
have that hat. If there isn't that person in the team, then the team is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I'm really very pleasantly, unfortunately, surprised that is because that probably more reflects my working places than than anything else. But I'm really happy to hear the way you're organizing, and it sounds quite heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Because it's also work is not work is work can be something that we can to some extent enjoy and find meaning and value in.
Yeah. I feel so as well. I think that we spend way too much time in a life at work for us to not feel good there.
Yeah.
It's not going to be all the time. That's unrealistic. But even in our personal life, it's not like we are happy all the time with what we do or what we have. Um, but as long as we can counterbalance it with a good amount of healthy kind of working environment, um, I think it's our responsibility to do it.
Mm, mm, yeah. And I really like that you bring up the word responsibility because there is a lot of how responsible we are for the choices we make when it comes both to work and partners and everything else. And speaking about uh, partners, the question I also have is around gender and how do you experience your own gender and what does that mean to you, and how you grow up within that context because you are an entrepreneur, you're a
Mm-hmm.
businesswoman, um, which I imagine was not that modeled in Romania.
Um, it's interesting because I've, in my family at least, I've always felt that my mom is the head or the leader. And maybe because of that, I never quite thought that I would have any disadvantages as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't felt it after coming to the UK either. Um, I feel like, and at the same time, it ties in with my own kind of personal values and choices as well, because I definitely think that um, women should have the same level of opportunities as men do. But at the same time, I feel like we should also be free enough to choose, for example, to be housewives or mothers if we want to, in an environment or culture that really promotes being a career woman.
Mm, yeah.
um, and I think that's something that I was struggling with a little bit after graduating in the UK, and after getting married as well, because and I'm expecting now, so I'm going to be a mother
Mm.
in January. And I always knew that it's important for me to give that part of my life priority, but at the same time, feel like I am free enough or independent enough to make choices for my career as well. Like to not depend fully on my husband, or at least if I want to, I can tell him that I want to work or I want to earn or I want to do this or whatever, without being stopped from it. And I feel like mm, that's not very popular opinion, I'd say nowadays, or at least not with the women that I have around me. I think there was some time when I was feeling a little bit judged for it. that I am choosing to be a
Mm.
housewife, or to not have a career that is, or not have a life that is fully focused um, on career. Um, and maybe again, that's another aspect where therapy has helped me understand that I I can be me. I don't have to fit in any of the stereotypes. I can be both at different moments in life, and that's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really beautiful what you're saying. And I can very much relate to um I mean I don't have a partner and I don't have kids, but if I do and when I do want to spend the motherhood with the kids and like focused on that
Mm.
and not building my career in that time.
Mm.
Because to me that's it's a life experience um that I just don't want to miss.
Yeah. And I think that's what I feel like is the most important, just to be allowed to have your own choices
Versus, yeah.
and beliefs without feeling judged for it, just because the trend is you have to prove that you're a career woman and we have equal rights. Yes,
Yeah.
we do. But part of that equal rights means I can choose if
Yes.
I think that's something for me or not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if I may ask, what was your experience of pregnancy?
um, it was so far generally it was good. I had an easy pregnancy, and hopefully the end will be the same. Um, but I did go through a little bit of a conflict when it comes to priorities with work, because like I was saying, in my mind I always thought that if I have a child I do want to focus on the baby more. Even like throughout the pregnancy, although I've had it easy, there were a lot of moments of fatigue, for example, and because I've cut down on caffeine, I feel like that automatically dropped my energy levels to half of
Mhm.
what I was doing before, and I was doing probably more than 100% before. And it took some time and a few therapy sessions to understand that it's okay for my focus to shift. It's okay to not have the same exponential growth that I've had like within the academy for some time, because I am focusing on something else, and I kind of have to divide my attention between the two babies almost.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, it's been interesting. I'm still waiting and looking forward to see how it's going to change after um, the baby's here, in terms of the academy and the balance that I have. And something that came up very recently in the last therapy session that I had was that maybe I am a little bit scared that it's going to change my idea of work ethic,
Mm.
and how much attention I can actually give to work, and that it wouldn't necessarily be fair to, try to maybe multitask or
Yeah.
have a meeting whilst I am also caring for the baby or things like that, um, which is not usually my idea of professionalism and how you uh, treat work. So it's at the moment it's an adapting phase.
Yeah. It's
It's
it's a transition, and even when it's not um a human baby, but another project baby,
yeah.
those transitions can be quite challenging.
Mm.
Yeah, and there are always places which open up the history and our relations to our history, and
Oh
yeah,
yes, definitely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Um, I feel like we have kind of rounded up this conversation, but I'm wondering if there is anything I haven't asked, um, and you feel like it's really important to add, or we have missed something?
Nothing honestly that I can think of. I feel like we've gone through a lot of um, things, but somehow still related
Mm.
um, on the theme. So yeah, I'm I'm generally happy, and I feel like I've spoken a lot. So
Well, to end, I just want to ask you the rapid fire ones, which is what kind of compliments do you like to receive?
um, I think one of them that I like to receive is that um, I help people in either becoming more confident in themselves or just allowing themselves to feel vulnerable. Um, it's usually the messages that I get after I've shared something vulnerable about myself.
Mm.
And I think those are the compliments that I am happy to receive and I don't feel awkward about them.
Hmm. Hmm. And what might be one absurd thing about you that not many people know about?
One absurd thing about me. Um, on a plate of food, I always leave the best thing on the plate for the last. I I don't know why I do
I
it,
admire that strength.
but but the basically the last bite has to be of that thing on the plate that I like the most.
Wow. I do exactly the opposite. And I admire people who have the patience to wait for like,
Yeah, no, I will eat the good thing, but I have to leave a last bite. It's almost like finishing with that thing on my taste buds. I don't know.
yeah. And I didn't ask you, do you have some hobbies or anything that you like to do that supports you in your journeys?
um, I don't think I have a lot of practicing hobbies now. But I do love coffee in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I right now I'm having decaf. I got used to it. But yeah, that's a good break for me. And I love singing, but now I only do it when I'm driving. Um, and
And do you sing something Romanian or something more
uh,
uh
either
okay.
Romanian, English, like Bollywood as well,
Okay.
because my husband is of Pakistani origin, so I adopted a bit of that as well.
Okay. Wow. Wow.
Mm.
And what kind of gifts do you like to give to people?
Um, I like to give gifts that will become a nice memory someday.
Mm.
So either it can be photos, for example. It can be some sort of a message that is personal and related to a specific time in their life. Um, Recently, there is a book actually that I like to give people, especially women. And it's a book by Anna Mather.
Okay.
She's a psychotherapist, and it's called um, the something with self worth. I can't remember it now. It's slipping off my mind.
We
But
can
yeah,
we can put
part
it
of
in
it
the
is self worth. Yeah,
we can put it in the show notes. Okay.
I'm going to search it because now it's bugging me. Anna Mather. Um, self. Oh, know your worth.
Okay.
Know your worth. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that's the one.
And lastly, is there anything you want to ask me before we end?
Um, what I want to ask you actually is what does um, therapy and your training as a therapist actually mean to you, and why have you decided to do it?
Mm, thank you for this question. I like it a lot. Um, therapy, my therapy, has really been something that has profoundly um, changed me.
Mm,
Uh, and when I say my therapy, I mean specifically the therapy I had in the last 3 or 4 years, um, where I feel I've gotten to know myself in very deep ways.
mhm,
And also, I've allowed myself to feel my own pain and think that it's um, think that it is valuable, that it's not something that I should neglect because
mhm,
other people have it worse.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, so that's a really big important thing, and it also helped me to discover that I'm bigger than I think I am. And that I have a voice and a place in this world. And sometimes I kind of forget that. Um,
Mhm,
but often I get reminded back. Um, and the reason I've started training was I always was interested in therapy. I actually when I was in Serbia and I was going to a science school, I also went to a psychology class.
mhm,
Um, but at that time, I didn't know you can actually study 2 universities because it didn't feel like a physically possible thing to do.
mhm,
Um, and so I just left it. But then when I had my personal therapy and when I could see how much it offered me, it felt like I cannot continue living life without offering the same back to someone else.
mhm,
Because it felt like I was so excited about the potential of it, about what it can do because of what it has done for me, that I realized I cannot sit still in this. It
yeah.
felt really, and especially because my therapy was going all the way back to some very um old baby wounds, if you want. And working with those and reaching those is actually quite hard
Yeah.
as therapeutic work.
Mhm,
But when you do reach them and when you do work with them and acknowledge them and eventually somehow transmute them inside of you, then it's a really wonderful thing.
mhm.
And life is fuller
Yeah.
because it's almost like I live from a different place now, if it makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's totally relatable. And I can completely understand because I've had my own childhood journey and traumas and things that I always kind of knew that maybe they have
Yeah,
an
there.
impact on me,
Yes. Yeah.
but I never understood how
Yeah.
until I started therapy. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's I love generally what you're saying because I feel like maybe that's what I'm trying to do a little bit with the coaching that I do in English, just to give a little bit back from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I see it a little bit like a river of life. And what a therapist has given me is almost like a river that has floated in me and then that can now float through me somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's basically passing on that torch of life somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
It's it's nice. It's nice to be able to um share and at the same time discover yourself through
Yes,
everything.
exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
So just before we end, where can people find you?
So I am generally on all the social media platforms. You're going to find me by my name, Amalia Bhalli, either on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
everywhere, basically.
Okay. Yeah, and I just need to say before we end, for my own stuff, that it would be really nice for people who are listening and if they like what they've heard to support the podcast. So there is a GoFundMe link that will be in the description. And it's just a one-time donation, and you're not obliged to do anything more. So that would be really helpful. And also, even if you can't, if you just share the link, that would be really meaningful. And I just want to thank you really a lot for just being you and allowing yourself your authenticity that then can guide others. It was just lovely to experience you.
Thank you so much. And yes, it was I think a full kind of conversation. And I loved it. So thank you very much for guiding that.
You have just heard the story of Amalia Bhalli, the founder and CEO and a psycholinguist specialist who has created the Amalia Bhalli Academy that delivers specialist English courses for adults. What really sets her apart is her belief in the power of dreams. She's a firm believer that if you have the courage to pursue your passions and do what you love, you can make a real difference in the world. She understands that language learning can be a daunting task, and that's why she created a warm and welcoming environment that encourages the students to feel comfortable and confident as they progress. If you liked what you heard, please share and subscribe so that these stories can reach more people.